Woo. Am I still here? Sorry, all my stuff just like all my stuff locked at once. Sorry, that was really weird.
Oh.
Okay, I know I promised that after last week we'd go back to Meghan hosting, so I apologize that you are all having to hear me driving the show, or driving the bus again this week. But Meghan, I am just happy that we are able to activate you off the IR finally. How you feeling?
He's lying. I asked to host the show. I'm kidding.
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm feeling so much better. I feel basically at 100%, not enough to have been at skate before the team left for the road trip this morning, but everything, when activities resume, I think they'll be back in town next Monday, Tuesday for a quick home game and then go back on the road. So I will be around for that at least, and I'm really missing hockey, so I'm just excited to be back.
Yeah, this is the DNVR Avalanche at the Rink podcast. We missed Meghan at the rink this week, but as always, she was staying active behind the scenes, even with her. Look, I swear, he waits for the shows to start. He knows when they're coming, and he just jumps in at the worst possible times. But yeah, Meghan, you were staying busy. You were staying up to date with everything going on behind the scenes. Christmas last week, last week, and then we had you being sick this week. So our schedules have been a little bit off, but we'll have this show today, and then we should be back on track, starting with written piece on Sunday, show again on this next Monday. So we should be back going. But Meghan, before we get officially started, anything that you've just been anything that's on your chest that wasn't in the At the Rink pod that you're just wanting to get out there? Are you ready to go?
No, I feel ready to go. I feel like I've beat the Sean Barron's World Juniors, and there's just a big competition today between USA and Canada. So I'm really looking forward to that. This could age incredibly poorly by the time that so we'll see. It's going to be exciting to watch either way.
Yeah. Did you watch the Canada overtime game the other night? No, the Bednar overtime winner. It was nuts. I felt so bad for the Slovakian kids. They played great. Their goaltender, I think 52 saves.
Oh my gosh.
Between regulation and overtime. And Bednar it was an incredible play, incredible goal. But you could just tell those Slovak kids were out of gas. It was heartbreaking for them. But yeah, the Connor Bedard legend kind of continued to grow. Fun World Junior so far for you?
Absolutely. Honestly, Connor Bedard has been a big reason for that too. Yeah. He's just so impressive. And at his age too, even younger than other players in the tournament, you've been looking down the pipeline at this player for a while now, and you just see why he impresses the way that he does. And even the maturity that he has at his age, he is mentally wired to be a pro right now. It's a little scary to imagine what he's going to do once he is in the NHL, where he ends up, what kind of talent is going to be placed alongside him.
Physically matures a little bit more too, because to your point, he's a very young kid. So yeah, no, it's going to be wild. It's going to be crazy to see what he can become for sure. Damn, I had something in mind that I was going to say when you were talking, but then you started talking about Bedard and I just got completely sidetracked. Oh, well, it'll find me again. Oh, that was what it was. We normally won't be doing these shows remote. These will normally be in-person shows. But again, with Meghan a bit on the mend this week, we had to find time in the schedule and all that stuff. So just last little programming note. Today's show is remote. I'm at home. Meghan's at home. But normally going forward, we will both be in the studio. Just another small little programming note. Of course, give a shout out, as always, to our boy Yahir, who is running things behind the scenes, making sure you guys can see us and hear us. He will also be in person with us normally, but sick times call for desperate measures, Meghan, you and I were in Arizona last week together for the Avs at Yotes at Mullet Arena. We both had a great time seeing the new venue. We do have a video, a spotlight video up on our DNVR Sports YouTube channel. Go check that out to see everything that we got into there at Mullet Arena. It was a good experience. But Meghan, you and I were really excited because it was really the first time that we got an update from Jared Bednar on Bowen Byram beyond just he's not progressing. And then we got a little bit more of an update yesterday.
Back to injuries, just real quick. Are we, with Landeskog, maybe to a lesser extent Byram, are we looking at just not responding to treatment the way it was expected, or have there been setbacks?
Well, Landy a while back got reevaluated and got a new game plan from like his return to be back now. So I wouldn't call it a setback. I think he's making really good progress. We're happy with the way it's going. It's just a new timeline. That timeline changed a little while ago. I would say Byram was not responding to treatment for a while. Now he is. So like that's looking better now too. So his timeline of being back right now basically got doubled. So like he's I can't give you an exact timeline because I don't know. But now these things are starting to come together for him. So both guys moving in the right direction.
Jared Bednar alluded to this, and then to you and I in Arizona, and then really just did kind of drive it home. He wasn't responding to treatment, and now he is, and it sounds like he's back on that kind of like 4 to 6 week timeline. They're maintaining that it's a lower body. Just how nice is it from your perspective to finally be able to get a little bit more clarity? Because I'm sure you are getting asked in your DMs as much as I am about what's going on with Bo.
Yeah, it's hard because I think a lot of people have grown conspiratorial and distrusting of the organization surrounding injuries at this time. And so it probably doesn't instill much confidence to people listening. But from our perspective, the pieces we are gathering have been consistent. What we were told in Arizona actually addressed the treatment, and it sounded like that was sort of a time where you could pinpoint that he probably was beginning to respond to treatment around that time in Arizona and has been since then moving forward, and that it's trending in the right direction. And even your suspicion that it could be high ankle sprain related would kind of track with some of what we're learning about treatment, responding to treatment, and the timeline that we now have moving forward. Would make a lot of sense to dispel then any concussion related concerns that people have. And the reason it makes me feel a little bit better too is the differences in how Bowen Byram has been present at the arena compared to when it was concussion related. It took a toll on his mental health so much that he wasn't around the rink. He was receiving treatment and with family at that time. That this is just very different in that he has been around the arena, around the fellas, and looks like he does really basic dry land stick handling kinds of stuff here and there. It's very different from how things were handled when it was concussion related, that I want to emphasize those differences because everything we are being told is lower body. And it's nice that we have a little bit more clarity that it's related to something receiving treatment that is he's just now responding to. Obviously, we wish we knew more details. It's not for a lack of trying to get those answers, but it does feel like it's finally trending in the right direction because it was stagnant for so long. We were asking in the media room every day if there was an update. The answer was just no. And so now at least there's a little bit of something to move forward with. That stagnancy feels broken. There's a little bit of motion now.
Like you said, it was funny because Jared would sit there and kind of run through, here's what's going on with Val, or, and at times Rodriguez or Lehkonen, Landeskog, whatever. And then we'd get to Bo and he'd go, and no updates. And it was just this really weird, like, why is there some level of update on every single guy except for Bo? It's nothing. So yeah, I think like you said, the stagnation being broken just makes you feel a little bit better. And then I did just want to touch on the one other thing that you pointed out, that we see him at the rink and he's not just like, in his pea coat and polo and all that stuff. Like, no, it's obvious he's coming out of the gym doing some type of dry land. Like you said, I don't know if that's pushing it very hard or taking it really slow, but he's active. And that is something that, as you correctly pointed out, is different than when he was dealing with the concussion issues last year. He wasn't around, he wasn't getting on the bike, or doing any kind of off ice workout. So now getting this little bit of an update in addition to the things that we've seen. For me, I definitely think it's feeling a little bit better. And it sounds like kind of the same for you. I want to talk about Gabe Landeskog because he's kind of in a similar boat. That clip that we heard from, Jared Bednar from yesterday, finally starting to respond to some of the treatment, but he's still a ways out. Jared Bednar is maintaining that he'll be back this season. Meghan, we were having this conversation. We've missed you around the media room this last week, but we were talking about it yesterday. If you're the Avs, where are you at entertaining shutting Gabe Landeskog down until the playoffs and leaning into the LTIR thing that they didn't dip into last year?
I don't feel like
you sound like you love the idea.
No, I don't love the idea. I'd rather get Gabriel Landeskog fully healthy, of course. Like, whatever the timeline for his return actually shakes out to be, I don't have this deep feeling in the pit of my stomach that it's going to be so much longer after January. Like, it's January 4th. So it could be early February. Like, we could be targeting the All-Star game. I don't know. Right. But if I did know, it would help me to better answer this question, because I don't have this feeling that it's going to be put off so much farther from the expected timeline, which was January, that it would warrant shutting him down for the season, because I think it would benefit a playoff Gabriel Landeskog to get in games. One, because I don't want to say the Avs are out of a playoff picture, but I don't want to gamble on that too much either. Yeah. They could really benefit from having Gabriel Landeskog back in the lineup, the leadership that he brings, and honestly, just getting back to game form and getting him in games feels really important too.
Yeah, see, that was along the lines of what I said. For me, if you're talking, I don't know, Meghan, back half of March, then at that point, I'm saying, look, if you can, if the second half of March is your best case scenario on this, and you're saying we're hoping, and I'm pulling this date out of a hat here, right? If you're saying we are hoping that he can be back by March 10th, I'm honestly just saying, give him the full window. Let him make sure he's fully healthy. We're back in this situation because he came back early. Now, it was for a playoff run. They win the Stanley Cup, so I think everyone within the organization would say worth it 10 times out of 10. But the Avs are in this situation because the return was rushed. So I'm with you, Meghan. If you are talking late January, early February, or right around that All-Star break, get him back into games. I'm totally in agreement. That is more valuable than waiting. But to me, if you are talking about getting him back in 10 games, I say just let him sit and make it a little bit easier on yourself at the deadline. With maybe not having to rely on some of these teams eating half of a contract or having to give up an extra asset to get a third team involved. But I'm with you. If you've got 15 plus games, bring him back. Bring him back. Get him into the lineup. It's good for him. And to your point, don't take for granted that this Avs team could really use him. But I really do. I think if you're getting into that 10 to 15 games range left, slow it down, let him take his time, let him come back in the playoffs fully healthy. And if they haven't closed the loophole yet, exploit it.
Exploit it.
But yeah, I'm with you. And that was something else that Jared Bednar talked about yesterday was, can't take this for granted, right? He's talked about, he wants the team to be confident, but he wants them to be confident for the right reasons and for things that they've done this year and not just what this team has done in the past, and be confident in the work that you've put in and how you're showing up every day. And I think you're right, Meghan. Gabe Landeskog goes a much longer way in that than I think people realize. They are finally starting to get healthy, so we're not necessarily having to talk about calling new players up as much. But Meghan, you wrote about in the Sundays at the rink this past Sunday about how the Avs have been able to integrate some of these guys in. And, I talked both to Jared Bednar and Andrew Cogliano yesterday just about their assessment of the first half of the season. The Avs sit over 500. From a points percentage standpoint, they're on the inside of the playoffs. And Meghan, I think what you talked about plays a really big role in that. With as many players the Avs have used this year, and guys that weren't in the system the last number of years, how easily they have been able to come up to the NHL club and integrate right into the system and know what is expected of them. I think that's been huge for this Avs team to stay competitive this year. If you're having to throw guys in who are on page one, I don't know if the Avs are sitting where they're sitting right now, but to the point of what you talked about, Charles Hudon talked about with you, there's an emphasis on making sure that playing with the Eagles feels as similar as possible as playing with the Avalanche.
I think there's a lot of big takeaways from this conversation with the front office and their knack for seeking out stylistic fits for the organization, because whether it be someone they bring into Loveland with the intent of being called up to the Colorado Avalanche, or even a waiver claim like Dennis Mogin, which I talk about in the piece too, there is a knack for being able to scout stylistic fits, and it'll come up really big when we start getting into trade deadline talks too, because we look at how well the Avs handled last year's trade deadline in finding stylistic fits and matching needs. And then it's very cyclical, because even in the way that they utilize their American League team, it lends itself to this conversation, a lot of stylistic fits because of how they execute in Loveland, making an easy transition for call-ups at the NHL level to include people like Brad Hunt and Andreas Englund. Like, it's not as though they have been game changers in their call-ups, but they have been serviceable. And you look at December, take away what happened after the holiday break. Those were some really rough games for the Avalanche. There were a lot of positives to be drawn. And one of our conversations is going to be a lot of these games happening outside of regulation, but they still managed to pull out wins. And that's what's important. And it all kind of comes back to what these call-ups have been able to do in helping this team to stay afloat despite being as injury depleted as they are, because of how they execute in Loveland, because of how they teach in Loveland. Even Brad Hunt, at his age, is not above learning new things that he can take with him in an NHL call-up stint that have made him very useful, to include Andreas Englund as well. Last year, the Colorado Eagles D-Corps had a lot of players who had a career year that actually left the organization because they performed so well. Roland McEwen and Jordan Gross. Andreas Englund, though, staying in there, also took huge steps forwards in his personal game, and I think it has just all helped the Avalanche to stay afloat despite all of these injuries, because the systematic fit is a lot easier. 55-minute drive down the highway. It's also just an easy transition for these guys to get up and down between the leagues. And it has really helped the Avalanche to stay afloat.
Well, it's something that I talk to a lot of, as many of the guys as I can. And I've done it even before this year, but obviously this year we've had a much larger influx of players coming up from the American League. And just how much it helps them being around the team and taking part in those NHL practices. And what you're talking about there with the proximity being so close, and just what a huge advantage that is, that I want to make sure we like doubly emphasize, because you're seeing this more and more around the NHL, where teams are trying to be as close as possible to their American League affiliate. But what an advantage this is, because Meghan, just how many times this year have we seen them call guys up, send guys back down after practice, getting in that one last practice, getting in those pro habits. We can have you here because we know we can send you back down and you're 45 minutes from your Loveland apartment. Like, this isn't getting on a plane and, heading out or this, that, and the other. They really seem to take advantage of how close the two teams are geographically. And then I just wanted to bring back up and just kind of get your opinion on how you think this kind of fits in, because I go to a guy, you mentioned Brad Hunt. I think of a guy like Alex Galchenyuk, who, comes in to training camp on a PTO, has the injury stuff. The Avs eventually end up bringing him back and he gets signed off that PTO. And I think it was really easy for everyone, including us, to say, yeah, well, this is a guy that they're going to call up pretty immediately and he'll try to be part of the solution. Well, they did call him up, but they decided not quite ready yet. So instead of punting on, technically kind of like a reclamation project and having him come in and out of healthy scratch and things like that, they said, go down to Loveland, or go up to Loveland, I guess. Go up to Loveland. Get a better understanding of the system. Get a better understanding of what's expected of you. Work on your defensive game. And what did Jared Bednar tell us just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Meghan? The NHL, they don't use the NHL to develop. That's what they use the American League for. And you're supposed to be taught what you're supposed to do in the American League, have a basic understanding of it, be able to put it in play or in practice, however you want to say that. And then it's polished and it's refined at the NHL level. That's what I think is so fascinating about not only the way the two clubs work together, the NHL and the AHL club, but just that philosophy as a whole, that even a guy like Alex Galchenyuk, we're not here to teach you this stuff. Go learn it there and then perfect it here. But even a guy like him is not immune to being sent down to make sure he's being taught the right things.
It's interesting, too. We've talked about it a little before, but I think the master plan for Galchenyuk was to have him stay in the AHL even longer, and the recall happened sort of because of the state of injuries with the Avs presently, but I think the plan had actually been for him to stay in the AHL much longer before he even got a call up. And so that's why I don't know what the future plan is for Galchenyuk. We probably won't see him vying for an NHL regular position anytime soon because he is meant to work on the details of his game in Loveland for some time first. And I don't know what amount of time that takes because it's a similar situation for Ben Myers in the amount of time that he needed to spend in the American League, but he's assimilating very well in the NHL right now that it could change that conversation pretty quickly. But they definitely had a plan for Galchenyuk, and it is because of the faith they have in the American League to handle a player like him.
Yeah, it's maybe been one of the biggest under the radar changes that the Avs organization has made in quite some time. For a long time, Meghan, I felt like the American League was just kind of a black hole for them, but it really seems like a position of strength for this organization now. And I think they've churned out a lot of talent. Not necessarily like they're fully developing these guys, but they're using the American League in the right way. And I think you've seen the payoff on that
Absolutely.
this year. You mentioned the Avs needing more time than regulation to get things done. But really, Meghan, it started the larger conversation of just 3-on-3 in general. Because, wow, were those 4 straight overtimes that we had to watch at Ball Arena boring. And I don't know, just for me, like I'm stepping back and saying 3-on-3 was put in place because it was supposed to bring the speed, the skill, the fun, the excitement, and give credit to the coaches and the teams. Man, they have coached that fun right out of it, Meghan.
You know, I think I just have anxiety because I still find overtime to be really thrilling, but I think I just have anxiety. And that could also be something to look into. But you are right, and it comes back to a conclusion we probably could have anticipated, that NHL teams are going to have strategy that they implement in overtime, and it's going to be pretty tactical, and realistically, it's a lot of scoring chances back and forth. Rush attacks always mean the possibility of an odd man rush the other way. And so as a result, they have to play kind of patiently and cautiously, no matter which team. Like, that strategy isn't going to look very different among organizations because of the realities of 3-on-3. And so as a result, it could look a little bit, there could be a flatness to it because players are looking for grade A chances. They're not settling for the B+ chances because they don't want to risk an odd man rush the other way. And as a result, it can look a little boring. And I don't necessarily mind it, but at that point, you know, why not just go back to 5-on-5?
Right. Well, so it's funny because I think Nathan MacKinnon is the best kind of like litmus test on this. Where like 3-on-3 was made for a guy like him because what the NHL wanted was, we want these guys, we want their eyes to light up when they see the amount of open ice, right? Like, we want them trying to take these lanes and drive hard to the net and take their opportunities. And that's what I think made 3-on-3 so fun for the first couple of years, was that you'd see these really high-end skill players see a lane and it would be like I wonder if I can get through that lane before it closes. And they either made a spectacular play to get through the lane before it closed, or the lane closed on them and you had an odd man rush going the other way. But what they've started doing, and again, Nathan MacKinnon, I think, is the easiest one where you can see the difference. He'll take those couple strides, but then once he sees, I probably won't make that lane, he is perfectly content neutralizing the speed, taking it back out, slowing it down. And Cale Makar was even telling us it's really, the strategy isn't even about what you're doing, but it's basically like, okay, well, how many line changes can we get while their first group is still on the ice? Like, how fresh can our guys be while their guys are dog tired? And I just think it's interesting. So I floated the idea in Sundays at the rink get rid of the blue lines. Get rid of offside, because then you can still be slowing it down, but you have the ability to kind of stretch the rink a bit. Do you have any ideas? Or I guess you like it the way it is. Are you saying, like, are you, Meghan, like, no notes, just leave it? Your anxiety can't handle the rink being able to be stretched? Or, like, do you have any thoughts on what you would like to see for overtime?
It's a great question, because my anxiety probably couldn't handle it. So that's probably why I'm content with the way that it is, because it is cautiously executed. But I'm trying to think realistically. For the sake of the sport and growing the game, you probably do want an overtime to be more fun. I think that's the part too that the league maybe didn't think long and hard about, is at this point in the game, players are tired. And so they are also part of their strategy is capitalizing on tired legs. And that's part of what the first 30 seconds of overtime are going to be, is, like Cale Makar talked about, is just trying to get the freshest bodies on the ice. And that also doesn't really lend itself to entertainment, because someone like McKinnon's eyes growing wide at the open ice, you probably imagine happening when he's not played 3 periods of hockey. So I don't know that there's a lot to remedy it, especially when winning the game and points are on the line. The fun and the excitement is not really there for players, because the stakes are just too high.
Right.
I don't know that much changes unless you do something a little bit zany.
Like, yeah. So let me float this to you, because you were out this week when we were talking about it. I remember one of the original proposals, and I don't know how far it ever actually got, but one of the original proposals was, well, what if we went 5 minutes 3-on-3 and then like 3 minutes 2-on-2 before you got to a shootout? I mean, talk about open ice.
You're right, but I feel like the level of caution would then just translate to 2-on-2. I think
even higher.
Yes, I think they would play. Yes, just kind of passing back and forth, relatively low risk play, because it's still the issue of like what's at stake and what they could give up if they allow a chance the other way. I don't know. I haven't thought long and hard about it, so I'm going off the cuff here. But I feel like they would find a way to make 2 versus 2 boring as well.
Yeah, I don't know. People have talked about, like, do you put in a shot clock, or do you put in rules that say, like, once you enter the zone, or like if you leave the zone, you forfeit possession. I don't know.
Shot clock is interesting. That would mitigate a lot of what I was just imagining slowing down plays from happening. So I could see that helping.
Or maybe even like not even necessarily like a shot clock, but like you have to get it into the, like, across the blue line in under a certain amount of time. And if you don't, I don't know, like a 10-second into the offensive zone clock or some shit like that. I don't know. Something.
I could be talking.
I like my idea the best, but that's because it's mine and I'm a selfish person. But like, just get rid of the blue lines and let them stretch the rink out a bit. Slow it down all day, but now if you suddenly have to account for someone on the far blue line and in between your own defensive dots, like, I feel like that would open up the rink quite a bit. Just for overtime. Get rid of the blue lines just for overtime.
Have you asked any goaltenders about this?
I haven't, but you know what? Actually, Meghan,
pull some goalies.
I'm gonna start polling some people on it once they get back in town. Great suggestion. All right, we are gonna switch gears a little bit here. 3-on-3 is a little bit more of a broader scope thing, so let's step outside of the Avs organization a bit here. And Meghan, we don't have to get very far into it, but you wrote just a nice, quick little recap of where we are at with the Hockey Canada investigations. We did a show on them over the summer. We don't need to get into everything that we got into on that show again, but I do want to make sure that people know, hey, this is something that's still going on. We're still following it. Where are things at with the Hockey Canada investigations? Has there really been any progress made from where we were this summer?
Kind of, in terms of information we know is being investigated relating to the case, but it's not information that's made publicly known to us. So like what I personally know isn't so different, but I know that there's information that exists to help the investigation of the case that is being requested now. And so there's some things that are being held up in the courts pending approval, like this Globe and Mail article, which is whether you're a dieharder or not, and maybe you aren't able to read the 5-on-5 piece, I recommend looking up the Globe and Mail article that has been written about the 2018 case, because it encapsulates the updates pretty well. And it's basically things about a group chat that exists among the players that players have confirmed exists, that has texts that reveal information pertaining to the case. And so the summary is that it is still very much developing and unfolding, but there is information detailed in the application that they're submitting basically for permission and warrants to investigate these things further, to get access to the hotel, and to see the layout of the room, to get access to video footage, to get access to these group chats. They have to request permission. But just knowing that they exist adds a lot of color to the investigation. And the overall conclusion, too, is that there is reasonable belief that the alleged assault took place based on this information that they are trying to uncover and get access to. And so that does not prove that it happened, but it does mean that there is still a lot of information left to be uncovered, and that is why it is worth following along with.
Doesn't necessarily prove that it happened, but it does prove that there is a lot more evidence that like you said, I'm sure they had a good hunch existed. When you're talking about hotel footage and stuff like that, obviously they know that's out there, but now it is just about kind of curating all that into one spot. And yeah, it sounds from what I read and from what you put together, it sounds like the confirmed existence of this group chat kind of adds another, not another element, but it's something a little bit more concrete to go on.
Absolutely. So even if you don't have the access to the piece, check out the Globe and Mail article. And honestly, the writers contributing there have been doing a good job following the case. So if it is something that interests you, I'd recommend giving them a follow on Twitter as well.
And Meghan's write-up was in this past Sundays at the Rink written piece, which does drop every single Sunday, if I haven't said the word Sunday enough. Meghan, great work keeping up on that. Honestly, it's a tough one to stay on top of, because it's a horrific subject. But thank you for staying on top of that, because that is something that we talked about this summer, and it is something that has huge implications on the hockey world, the NHL, really anybody that's in the hockey community. So thank you for staying so up to date on that. The Avs were affected a little bit by this next thing that we're going to talk about, but really it was the Toronto Maple Leafs who made the big headlines on it. Meghan, you and I flew out. It took us a little bit, but we did fly out the day after Christmas. The NHL does have that listed as an official off day surrounding the holiday. It's December 24th, 25th, 26th. Teams are not allowed to take part in team activities. So that was why the Avs were originally supposed to fly out very early AM on December 27th, have a morning skate in Arizona. But for a couple reasons, they ended up having some issues at the airport. Even private charters were not immune to travel delays during the week of Christmas. So they ended up not getting in till later. But really, Meghan, the whole reason that all of that happened was, like I said, because of the pause. Teams were not allowed to travel. So come to find out, I've asked around to a few people. This is something that's been a little bit of a point of contention amongst players, teams, coaches with the league that, hey, we are having to travel on the same day. It's the only day of the year that it's allowed where you are allowed to fly in the same day as a game day and be expected to play that night. Other than Toronto, teams that traveled on the day of December 27th went 3-6. That includes the Avalanche, who did not have a good night in Arizona. The Toronto Maple Leafs won their game. Now, what is unique about the Toronto Maple Leafs is they flew out the night before. They were originally supposed to fly out after midnight to kind of skirt the rules, but everyone had arrived to the airport early. They decided to board the plane and leave right around 10:30 Eastern, landing themselves in some hot water, getting fined $100,000 by the league. Meghan, before I go to the next question, I just kind of want your thoughts on the fact that this is something that the league fines over. Are you in favor of this, saying, hey, the players need to be able to have the time, with their families if they so choose, and they shouldn't have to feel obligated? Or are you kind of in the situation or are you in the boat with the Leafs where, hey, we're all here, we all want to go, we should be able to vote on this unanimously as a team and not face a fine? Where do you kind of sit on this?
It's a slippery slope with the CBA and endorsing or accepting this fine, because then it opens the door to other violations that I would probably take more issue with. But I think the obvious answer is the scheduling issue, and that how that blame should be placed on the NHL shoulders and theirs alone, because I understand the fine, but I understand the frustration more, if that can make sense, because having players fly the same day of the game had obvious results for a lot of teams, and players personally feeling that they would prefer to travel the day before should be left to the players. The fact that this is written in the CBA like this, I understand that you don't want to pit anyone against one another if they do have a dissenting opinion that they would like to spend time with their family. The obvious solution is the scheduling issue and not having games so far away the very next day after Christmas. Because really, I understand the fine. They had to do it, but it is incredibly frustrating, and it's just a point to a change that needs to happen instead.
So to that point, Meghan, the Toronto Maple Leafs were playing in St. Louis. That is not It's not a quick little flight. I'm with you. Look, if you're going to be making teams play, cross country, cross borders, things like that, I think there needs to be some exceptions to this rule. And again, maybe it is something where it's like, we'll bump that from you have to wait till past midnight to you can fly at 10 p.m. the night before. Like, I think there needs to be something built in there. And really, it was the point of what I wrote about in the article was the Toronto Maple Leafs, like, they knew they were going to be fined. Like, they're not, this isn't their first rodeo. And ownership and management essentially said, cool, we'll eat $100,000 if we think thinks it gives us a better chance to win. I wrote it in the piece, Meghan. I love that way of thinking. Again, especially if you have all of your players there saying, yes, we agree. Meghan, you and I found out that there was actually a couple Avs players that went to Arizona early on their own accord, which is within their right to do because they didn't want to have to travel the next day. So I don't know, do you maybe open that up a bit where it's like the NHL says you can fly the day before, but you cannot require guys to do it? So if you have a team of 20 guys and 19 of them want to go the night before, but one guy wants to come in the next day, I don't know. I'd be okay with that if you let it go the opposite direction.
I understand too what the conflict might create is if the players who do stay home have any sort of performance issues because they arrive the same day of the game. Could create a little bit of conflict, but honestly, that's an internal issue that I would leave up to the organization and the culture of that team to address in-house, because that probably speaks to other things that are going on if they cannot get a universal yes on that sort of decision being made. Because it's very revealing that Toronto is very well aware of eating that fine, and they still see the value in making that decision, especially in terms of how it sets them up to win and the better likelihood of winning. That's actually incredibly revealing and something that the league should take note of, that teams are aware of how much of an advantage that this is and the fine, and they're willing to eat that.
Right. I thought this was a kind of looked like a minor story on the surface, but when you really look at it, I'm with you. I think there is kind of a larger issue at play here that I think at bare minimum the league needs to look at and address. Or look, here's the other harsh reality. You maybe have to take it to a 4-day holiday break, but teams are allowed to resume activities on that 4th day. Because I think you look at the results on the ice across the league, and I think it's pretty clear that there's a problem here. Meghan, let's wrap this one up. We do have the Sundays at the Rink piece from this week up right now. Some of the topics that we were just discussing. If you guys want a little bit more in depth on everything we were talking about, head on over to thednvr.com, plus several topics that we didn't get to today. We talked a little bit about Val Nichushkin. You get into what happened with JT Miller in the Vancouver Canucks game with Colin Delia. few other things in there. Go and check it out on the dnvr.com for our diehards. Meghan, I'll leave it with this. I wrote a little bit about just, the new year. It's done. It's been a crazy last year. For me, I just, want to reiterate how thankful I am. And Meghan, I genuinely am thankful for you coming on. And, we now have an outlet to do more fun stuff like this. And I think you and I have, really started to hit our stride at the rink in terms of, not ironically at the rink, but, in terms of bringing the content that we want to bring. And there's been times this year where it's been really frustrating. It's been really hard. It's been extremely tiring. But through it all, I've just been so grateful. This has been an incredible year for me personally, as well as us as a company and us as a beat. Like I said, I wrote just a tiny little thing. I wanted to say that and just wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to say anything about the end of the year. And then we'll get out of here for the day.
Absolutely. I regret too. I had gotten to my 5 things and I was like, I really would have liked to include a personal note. But the note is, even though I technically started working with you guys in November of last year, so my year mark happened around November of this year. But there's something that's very fitting about the beginning of a new year and reflecting on the year before. And I'm so grateful to you showing me the rink ropes. I don't think you realize that not many media outlets have the opportunity to send 2 people into that room that are able to collaborate and work together in the way that we are. And that has made it so much easier for me to build confidence and feel comfortable being there as well. And it's invaluable. And I think it shows in what we're able to do now. We built a lot of momentum and did great things in Arizona. I'm so upset that I got sick because I'm just excited to be back literally at the rink and covering this team. I know that things have been really frustrating from a viewer standpoint in the on-ice product, but I think that as the team begins to get healthier, we are going to be there right there with you every step of the way, bring you updates on injuries. Hopefully there are no more new injuries to come. I'm really looking forward to the day that we are able to talk about Bowen and Byram returning to the lineup. And I'm excited to do it with you guys. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the viewership being engaged and enjoying the content that we put out there. So I strive to bring you even better content into the new year. As always, if you guys have any feedback for us, leave it in the comments, but we appreciate you so much. We wouldn't be able to do it without you.
No, and that is a great point. I left out when I was just first saying that. We don't do any of this stuff without you guys. Whether it be the subscriptions you guys are signing up for and all that stuff, or just purely saying we like this content, we want to see more of it. So we really are. We're very thankful to you guys. Meghan, we'll leave with this. I had a manager tell me once, because a lot of people nowadays, I feel like, can be a little jaded with the new year. And it's like, well, you don't need a new year to improve yourself and make better strides and things like that. And while I do agree that is true, I had a manager tell me once that there is something just naturally cleansing about the calendar flipping over to a new year and feeling like you really do have a blank slate. And Meghan, I've never been more excited about the blank slate that we have in front of us. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much. Meghan, thank you. Glad you're feeling better. Our boy Yahir running the board, making sure you guys can see us, hear us, and he'll be doing some of the behind the scenes stuff to make sure this actually gets out. So as always, a ton of love to him. Jesse Montano, Meghan, Angley, Yahir, Vasquez. This is the DNVR Avalanche at the Rink podcast. Thank you guys. We'll talk to you next week.